Are you making a commitment to posting the full 2 hours? If you don't answer in the affirmative to that, then the conversation is over.
Norm, you like to be a bully, right? You're like to be a bully.
Just as the Nazis believed exactly what you're saying. Actually, the Nazis were more honest than you. I have to say that.
Really? You're comparing me to the Nazis.
I would say you're worse.
So you've compared me to a Holocaust. You've claimed I'm a Holocaust denier. You've told me that I'm worse than the Nazis. Why? Listen. I gotta tell you something. I'm not the one who sounds like a crackpot right now.
You have to be a complete moron to be making statements like that. You are child killers. You are murderers. You carry.
Who's you? Who's you?
Meaning the state of Israel and the society. When I had heard that Hamas militants had broken through the gates of Gaza concentration camp to quote Giora Island, yes, I was very happy. Euphoric. My constructive advice is Israel's society needs to be de-Nazified. Have a good day.
We have a deep, deep problem in the Jewish community among self-hating Jews like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein.
I take a pretty dim view of him and all anti-Zionists. I think they're subscribers to an ideology and really a sort of a secular faith that basically denies Jewish peoplehood, denies Jewish rights.
He's a fraud. He's a phony. He's not an academic. He was fired essentially from every institution he ever worked in based on his lack of scholarship. I've read everything he's written. There's not an original word in anything he's written. So, I don't think he should be taken seriously. I have no problem with people interviewing him and interviewing others as well. It's a question of choice. The marketplace of ideas should be open to everybody, and there should be an opportunity to debunk his falsehoods.
These are people that we're not going to convince. Their goal is to tear down, not merely what we hold sacred, but to, undermine the entire edifice of Jewish peoplehood and of Jewish rights. I think our response to them must be a strong no.
These are people who have turned against Jewish values and are trying to say, we're not anti-Semitic because we can't be, we're Jews. But, you're self-hating Jews and you're anti-Israel Jews. And that's even worse. We have to fight back and we have to clean our own stables.
I just don't believe he's a legitimate academic, in any way a credible voice that speaks to issues involving Jews and Israel. He is clearly self-loathing. He is hardly qualified to speak on nearly any subject. And I don't know any intelligent person that takes him seriously. I understand what makes him popular because he provides a lovely cover for natural anti-Semites that say, it's not just me. It's this Jewish, quote, academic, close quote, who also hates Jews, and he's a child of Holocaust survivors, and he hates himself, and he hates Israel. He must know something. And so we have to give him a platform because it gives us more leverage on the legitimacy of what we have to say. But I know the truth, the darker truth of this clown, and I have no interest, and I have never appeared with him. And so I just want to make it clear that however you choose to use this, that there's no confusion with the audience. We were not here at the same time.
What I'm doing lately to get the word out there, I have been, advised and told and warned against interviewing people, giving people a platform who have these opposing views. I went against that. I decided that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to interview a series of these people. I interviewed Norm Finkelstein. I have to tell you, I needed to take a rest after that one.
Norm Finkelstein, thank you for joining us on the Unfiltered View, and welcome. So let's start off. Tell us about yourself. What are the early years of Norman Finkelstein about?
My parents were refugees after the war. They came to the United States, I think, approximately in 1947. They were, after the war, in the DP camp in Austria, Linz, Austria, which is where they married We lived in the poorest area of Brooklyn, which was Bedford-Stuyvesant at the time. Now it's a rich artsy area. We moved to a slightly bigger accommodation in an area which is now Orthodox Jewish, Borough Park in Brooklyn. But back then it was a Jewish and Italian working class area. And my memories from there are positive. They're a bit blurry, but they're positive. And then my parents moved again to an upwardly mobile, lower middle class neighborhood, but the emphasis on upwardly mobile. This was the Jewish community, one step removed from Brownsville, the Jewish ghettos where most Jews lived in the 1920s and 30s. They were very ambitious. The kinds of ambition were only outstripped by the achievement. The magnitude of achievement of that generation it's breathtaking. If I were to name just the names you would be familiar with, and I'm telling you it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. Charles Schumer was the current Senate Minority Leader. He was 3 years ahead of me in my high school. Bernie Sanders attended my high school. Ruth Bader Ginsburg attended my high school. Five Nobel laureates in chemistry, physics, economics, 5 Nobel laureates, my high school. It was a public high school. We're not talking.
And this, we're not talking. This over. You've grown up. You've grown up in this sort of very typical sort of survivorship of people who were born out of surviving the Holocaust.
No. This is way off. You are so off. My family was wholly atypical. These were Jews who came over at the end of the 19th and early 20th century, and they ended up in these Jewish ghettos in places like Brooklyn. And they started to make their way out. And then they ended up, as I said, in areas like my own. My family had no connection whatsoever with that life trajectory. My parents were survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. They were poor. They were looked down upon because back then, a different era, to be a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust was a badge of shame. It wasn't a badge of pride. First of all, if you survived, the assumption was you must have done something dirty to survive. That was what everybody believed back then. And there was probably some elements of truth to it, because as you know, Primo Levi said, and my late mother said, the best did not survive. If you did not have pointed elbows, if you didn't have a very refined struggle to survive, you weren't going to survive. So those who were...
How did that make you feel growing up in that shadow of shame?
Oh no, it wasn't a shadow of shame. My parents didn't feel any shame. I said that's what they were perceived as. It was also the perception of the Jews went like sheep to slaughter. So, that was the expression that was coined. Oh, his name just slipped my mind. The famous chronicler of the Warsaw Ghetto. The name will come to me. I have the book sitting on my shelf.
Would you say that this sort of perception formed the future Norman Finkelstein?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So what are the early years of Norm Finkelstein? What shaped you?
What shaped me was my parents' experience during the war, my parents' own political outlook. They were, I wouldn't call them of the left. They were totally loyal to the point of complete blindness to the Soviet Union and Stalin, because in their view it was, and factually it's correct, it was the Red Army that defeated the Nazis. And also my parents felt that the Russian people understood war. They understood the horrors of war. So there was a natural sense of sympathy and a natural sense of sympathy, empathy. The Russians lost between 27 and 30 million people during World War II. On the Eastern Front, the Germans, on the Western Front, the Germans carried out pretty much a conventional war. But on the Eastern Front, it was a war of extermination. And so there was a natural sense of sympathy with the Russian people. And so they had, technically, they weren't, I would call themselves, I wouldn't say they were leftists, but because of their sympathies to Stalin and Russia, they found themselves being tagged as leftists because that was the litmus test back then. If you were pro-Russian, pro-Stalin, then you must be a communist and so forth. And that shaped me a lot. So I would say, and they were also deeply immersed in politics. I mean, we talk about.
And where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself? I know that you've got sort of an influence of Trotsky in you, and you've got some, sort of. Do you see yourself as a Marxist? Do you see yourself as a socialist? Where are you on that spectrum of political thought?
I situate myself in the expression I use is I see myself as part of the historical left. There was a historical left that emerges at the end of the 19th century with the Marxists and the anarchists and the First International, and it had three basic core beliefs. Number one, the capitalist system will not serve the interests of the masses of people. Number two, the working class is the class capable of, first of all, it's the most oppressed class, but also the class capable of overthrowing the capitalist system. And number three, one aspires to some sort of socialist society. And those are the core beliefs of what you might call the historical left, connecting social democrats, communists, socialists, anarchists, those three core beliefs. And I situate myself in that trajectory.
Norm, today, how do you see yourself today? Do you still aspire to these types of what you have labeled historical left references?
I think obviously a lot has changed, a lot more thinking has to be done. I don't think the core beliefs have been fundamentally have proven to be fundamentally wrong. The capitalist system right now has produced in my own country, the United States, a system where the three people standing behind Donald Trump at its inauguration, namely Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk, they controlled more wealth than 50% of our population. So the belief that the capitalist system polarizes wealth, inherently polarizes wealth, I believe that has been borne out. I believe also that the working class, though it's a very different working class than was imagined in the past, it's not a working class that's organized. It's not one that has great power because it's in these massive units of production. It's a very different working class, but I think broadly speaking, a movement based on that sector of society is the only one capable of wresting any real change. And I believe, I believe that the aspirations of a communist society, the aspirations are the correct ones. And if I were to ask to give a formula for it, I do believe that the correct formula for a just society is from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Namely, each of us do our best to make our maximum contribution to society, and then the results of our investment should be distributed according to need. If you have 3 children, you have more needs than if you have 1 child. If you have a child with disabilities, you might have more needs than a child with no disabilities. And so
it certainly sounds good, and I know the doctrine, and I know the proletariat sort of objective, and their claim against the capitalists. But honestly speaking, historically, it doesn't really work in practicality.
I don't want to pass judgment on that. It's you would have to say there's still, even after since the Russian Revolution, it's about 100 years of historical experience, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not very much. The transition from feudalism to capitalism took several hundred years, and it may be a much more protracted process than was imagined. And I also freely admit I don't believe in, as the Marxist tradition did, I don't believe in historic inevitability. There's every reason to suppose this system will continue. It certainly has sufficient wealth, organization, power, control to perpetuate itself. And it may not, you asked me what I aspire to, what I believe, which is somewhat different, I believe, than what I think is going to happen. What's going to happen, you never know. Yeah,
certainly we could spend this entire podcast discussing this very subject matter, but ultimately I believe that the utopian is sort of like a carrot, feeding the direction of a populace, and in any spectrum, left or right, you're always going to have it interfered by human greed and human beings who ultimately are going to pursue power and are going to operate under these helms of ideology to pursue their own power and their own opportunities in life. And this is always inevitably what happens, whether it's on the right and whether it's on the left. That moderate middle is very difficult to achieve, and I believe that's because of the nature of man. I don't think we have any knowledge whatsoever of what is the nature of men. There are speculations about human nature, but people who are knowledgeable on the topic, and I count among them Professor Chomsky, when he was asked about questions of human nature, and I don't believe there's anyone more qualified than. And Norm, may I call you Norm?
Yes.
Norm, you value human life. Do you value human life?
Yes, of course I do.
And in your ideology and in your sort of belief system, is human life the hierarchy that drives you?
I would say that what drives me is two things. One is truth, and the second is justice. And certainly in any system of justice, human life and the preservation of it has to be an uppermost value.
And equality?
Equality is a very vague term. There's equality of opportunity versus equality of ends, equality before the law versus natural equality. Equality is, and once you try to sit down and define it, it's like quicksilver, very hard to define.
So again, I'm going to say these all sound great ideas, but they get mirrored in sort of the spectrum, because equality is also, I don't think it's a universal prescription there, because there is a particular element of deserving or of effort. And I think that, equality, I agree with you. Equality is a difficult subject in terms of how you distribute that and how you enforce that. But let me ask you another question. What's your relationship with God?
There is no relationship whatsoever to God, period, full stop. On the other hand, having said period, full stop, the older you get, the more you realize life is an enigma, life is a mystery. It's very hard to make sense of it.
Does God exist? Does God exist to you?
God doesn't exist to me, but however, I am not judgmental on that question. My parents were very judgmental on that question. They were resolute atheists, and the invocation of God in their presence evoked a very harsh reaction. I am not just as a footnote, as a historical footnote, my mother, for example, belonged to the Polish middle class. And when the Soviets and the Germans divided Poland in 1939, a lot of Jews fled to the Russian side, knowing what's going to happen to the Jews on the German side, or sensing what's going to happen to the Jews on the German side. My mother's father was intensely religious, to the point, my mother said, worse than 10 rabbis in his fanatical belief in religion. And when the moment of truth came, he said, God will never let anything happen to the Jews. And that was my mother's cure for any belief in religion or God. So,
do you think was her belief sort of structured by the experience of the Holocaust?
Everything about my mother and father was structured by that experience.
So if there was a God, he or she would not have forsaken us. Is that the idea? And therefore there isn't a God?
My mother felt, even though she revered her father, he was apparently just a really honest, good husband and provider. She felt that error of his was very costly for the family. She was the only one that survived.
Is it an indifference then you have towards
No,
God?
I don't have an indifference.
Or it's not even a question existentially or otherwise?
You know the expression, you never miss what you never had. It was never an aspect of me growing up. It didn't exist. God did not exist as a concept in my home. So it's not as if I'm in a war with that concept. It's not as if I've been anguished over it. It just didn't happen. It's a phase of my life's journey that I didn't pass through.
But today God is a non-issue for you, or a non-question, or do you permit yourself to say that God might exist, but he doesn't exist for me?
I grew up in a tradition where, as Vladimir Ilyich Lenin put it, you can't be a communist without being a militant atheist. I no longer believe that. I believe that, as I said, life is an enigma, life is a mystery. Each of us has to make sense of it for ourselves. And people who make sense of this enigma, make sense of this mystery by incorporating God, who am I to say they're wrong? It's a mystery.
So I would take it that you're an ardent believer in the separation of church and state. Would that be correct? Would that be correct?
Without getting into technicalities, I am an ardent believer, and here I agree completely with Zoran Mamdani, that in a state, there can't be a hierarchy of rights. Within the context of a state, there has to be complete equality before the law.
Well, good luck with him, by the way, and let's see what happens. But my question to you is, and this is an important question, do you believe that there is no place for God, therefore, inside of political strategy or governance?
Whatever your particular outlook, you're entitled to it. And nobody has the right to silence you. However, when you talk about politics and when you talk about political strategy, it's fundamentally about trying to persuade and convince others of your point of view. Politics is not a moral stand, and it's not moral posing. Politics is about power. And for those who are powerless, which is probably a good solid 80% of, say, my own society, in order to empower the powerless, you have to persuade them, because the only weapon
At any cost?
The only weapon we have is numbers and truth. We have truth on our side, in my opinion, and justice on our side. And we have numbers on our side. Otherwise, we have nothing. Obviously, money.
So in a system of democracy, that would hold true. But what do you think? What do you think of people who use God as their rationale that dictate their actions?
I would say that is, in and of itself, it is not satisfactorily persuasive. You have to persuade.
Well, hold on. I'm not asking you for persuading people within a democracy. I'm asking you for a moral judgment here. What do you think morally of people whose actions are dictated by a radical or fundamental belief in God, and that's it?
If somebody were to knock on my apartment door right now and say, according to my Bible, your apartment is situated in a homeland that was given to me by God, and so you have to move and make way for me, I would say that's not a persuasive argument.
Okay, fine. So you do not. So you do. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Norm, but I just want to make sure I have clarity here because this is important. My take then from what you're saying is that you fundamentally oppose people's reasoning based on some kind of fundamental radicalization of their belief in God. That reasoning should be dictated by the will of the people. It should be dictated by convincing others or persuading others within the democratic process. Incorrect? Correct? Have I got it right?
I think there are multiple factors, and you can't reduce it to one. The will of the people can occasionally, and has shown itself to be, for example, in the case of Israel in the past couple of years, since October 7th, the will of the people can be completely lunatic. It can be completely insane. And so if the last criterion is the will of the people, that's obviously unsatisfactory. And that's why most systems of governance include what are called rights to protect the minority against majority rule. So the will of the people.
I think in a democratic process, yes, that is the beauty of democracy. Is hopefully that we achieve that. You won't get that in a totalitarian or in a religiously controlled regime. You're not going to get a concern for the minority. But in a democratic nation state, that is the ultimate objective.
It can or can be. We have a Bill of Rights that was incorporated in the amendments to the Constitution. You can have a system of government called democracy in which there's no protection for minority rights. Democracy can take various forms. And that's why I said, if you want me to make a commitment to the rule of the majority decides everything, my answer is no there. I think there are a large number of questions where the answer should be yes, to respect the will of the majority. Otherwise, it's very hard to imagine a society beyond one. But on the other hand, there are instances and there are historical moments when the will of the majority is not in and of itself a satisfactory criterion. You have to look at other factors.
Okay, but in that spectrum, I think that democracy has proven itself or is meant to satisfy the opportunity to give a voice to everyone within a system. Now, yes, human nature, greed, and all the other things that are going to influence power are going to detract from that. We both know that. But when I look at other systems of government out there, when I look at dictatorships, when I look at autocrats, when I look at theocrats, when I look at systems of government that control people through a radicalized and fundamental belief in an extreme belief in God, such as, since you brought up the situation, such as what we'll call, jihadists, I don't think that system really is about the will of the people. I think that's about the will of those who are in control and in charge, who dictate what the will of the people is going to be.
I think these are These questions are maybe useful in academic seminars, a graduate student seminar, but in the real world, they're just way too abstract, in my opinion, to have any concrete value. If you look at, for example, a large number, I would just take obvious examples. If you take the United States before the Civil War, the most ardent opponents of slavery, white and black, most ardent opponents, were fanatically religious people. They were believers in God. If you take people like John Brown, who led the second major insurrection in the United States against slavery, John Brown was, by any reckoning, a religious fanatic. Nat Turner, who led the insurrection before John Brown, he was a religious fanatic. The civil rights movement in the United States, it was broadly led by people who had a deep belief in God.
And they still do. But I think
that somehow being a religious fanatic in and of itself disqualifies you from being part of the political process, I just don't agree. I don't agree to it.
I'm not saying that it disqualifies you from a political process. There is a political process no matter what type of government is in power. What I'm talking about because you've talked about your love for human life and you've talked about the idea of equality and all of these great, ideals. And I'm saying that there are different systems of government that are going to give these ideals a better chance at achieving those objectives.
Most systems of government, this goes back to Aristotle's politics.
Yeah.
If you read Aristotle's Politics, he says that most systems of government, they're mixed. They're a mixture of different elements. Our country, the United States of America, has formally a democratic system, but that formally democratic system is, you can almost, at this point, you could say it's fatally, F-A-T-A-L-L-Y, it's fatally compromised by the concentration of wealth. A handful of people that are sometimes referred to as the oligarchy, sometimes are referred to as the deep state. A handful of people are making all the decisions, and the democratic process has been reduced to they choose the candidates, and we decide which among the candidates they choose we want to elect. That's our system. And
Norm, would you say that you're a dissenter of current government, of the way things are managed on a federal level for the U.S. today? Would you say that you have a dissenter opinion?
Actually, I have the majority opinion. That sentiment is what elected Zohran Mamdani mayor of New York. The sentiment that a handful of people now control our country.
But you have a dissenting opinion, though, of the current power of government. Is that correct?
I would say I have the same opinion as the overwhelming mass of people.
But your opinion right now, your ability to in public to oppose whoever's in power, that's a freedom. That is a privilege. That is a result of the democracy that you live in. That you're not. I mean, now the people in Russia, right, don't necessarily enjoy that same freedom.
I've said many times, if you look at the U.S. Supreme Court decisions on matters of freedom of speech, in general, they have been, over time, it took a long time for it to evolve, but at the end point, they have been really quite excellent. On the other hand, one has to be realistic about what these freedoms of ours, what they look like in practice. In the case, we have one sacred freedom in our country, not one among many sacred freedoms. It's called academic freedom. And that academic freedom, which is in our tradition and has been I think there only have been a handful of cases that came before the Supreme Court. But in those cases, the principle of academic freedom was upheld. That freedom was completely shattered after October 7th.
Do you think that freedom can be abused? Do you think in a society that freedom can be abused, masking as freedom, that people could actually? Do you think it's okay to speak, to incite, to incite hate and violence? Is that freedom?
We have a long jurisprudence on those questions, and in fact, that long jurisprudence on those questions traces back to John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. To just go through John Stuart Mill's On Liberty very quickly. You have the right to say anything, period, full stop. The only place where an issue of speech arises, the only place, is when the speech is in such close proximity to violent action, then the state has the right to intervene.
So the statement from the river to the sea, what does that mean to you?
That statement is completely protected by our Constitution. I don't know.
But what does it mean? What does it mean from the river to the sea? What I'm just wondering, what is the consequence of that statement?
Allow me to ask you a question, just because I don't know.
No, just answer my question, Norm.
But you see, sir, I've thought through these questions quite a lot. I've studied them. I've written on them.
Okay, so what do you? Let's not dance around them.
I study them, I write about them, and I teach them. So I'm fully conversant.
Fine. Tell me, what does the term mean in very simple terms?
I want to just give the background. In my country, the United States of America, you are allowed to advocate the violent overthrow of the government. Listen carefully. The right to advocate the violent overthrow of the government.
The first thing he said is so wrong that he should have been cut off instantly. He said, my government, I think he said, you are allowed under the Constitution to violently overthrow the government. It's 18 USC, either 2385 or 2365. And specifically says that you cannot encourage an insurrection through the violent overthrow of the government by force. The word is very specific, force and violence. What he means is that the First Amendment gives anyone the right to criticize the federal government and call for another government to replace it. What it does not allow is for anyone to engage in either, even if you're printing out a circular or a newspaper, you don't even have to be involved in the overthrow. All you have to do is circulate and circulate anything that seeks to engage people to engage in violence. Violence is the threshold. So the fact that he repeated the word violence twice is appalling, because what he wanted you to say, in my country, you can criticize the government and call for a change in the government. You cannot call for the violent change of the government.
In my country, the United States of America, you're allowed to burn the American flag.
Yes, I think that's Texas versus Johnson. It's a Supreme Court case. I happen to disagree with that decision. In my book, Saving Free Speech from Itself, I explain why I'm opposed to the decision. That doesn't mean that if you burn the flag and you're saying, I am burning this flag, and the reason I'm doing so is I'm encouraging all of you to go kill someone or to violently do something. That's called incitement. And incitement is not protected. The incitement to lawlessness is not protected in the United States under Brandenburg versus Ohio. So he's blurring the line. He wanted you to think that because you burn the flag, that means, yes, you can burn the flag. But if you've engaged in anything else that is inciting violence, imminent violence in any capacity, then that flag burning is out the window. It does not grant you that right.
In my country, the United States, you can go to a funeral of a war veteran and start shouting, down with the fags. You have that right. All of that is in our jurisprudence in the United States of America. Next to those rights, from the river to the sea, isn't even small change. In our country, the Ku Klux Klan is legal.
The First Amendment allows freedom of association, right? That's what he means. Freedom of assembly. I'm allowed to join any group I want. However, if the organization of the Klan had minutes or not just minutes, like manifestos, like Hamas, right? Like Hamas. If the organization of the Klan said the following, we believe, and it doesn't, in the violent overthrow of the United States government to install white power, and we believe in installing that through ways of violent means and insurrection, the First Amendment does not protect the Klan, right? So all he's saying is the Klan is legal in the United States. So what? It just means that they're allowed to join a club. But if the club had the same messaging that Hamas had, they would be shut down in an hour.
Okay, in our country,
I'm not sure what country, what your version of the United States is, but the fact is,
I teach U.S. Supreme Court law. I know the law. That's our country.
Not too many.
You may not like those freedoms.
Listen, Norm, you said that there's one exception to the rule
and it's
of freedom
very
of speech.
Circumscribed. John Stewart in the United States.
Hold on, come on. You just stated
no, sir. You cannot lecture me in an area.
I'm not lecturing. I'm just trying to understand the facts. I'm trying to understand the facts.
Than you. The question came up from the river to the sea. It came up just now in the Eastern District Appeals Court pertaining to a case on MIT and whether MIT was countenancing anti-Semitism. The judge explicitly ruled in conformity with our Constitution, from the river to the sea is protected speech.
There is no such thing as the Eastern District Appeals Court. There's no such court. So that's number one. What is he talking about? He means the First Circuit Appeals Court, not the Eastern District. And that court, by the way, sits in Boston. The First Circuit is the most liberal court in the United States, and it's in Boston. So that means that MIT was in its home court. And I can assure you that decision would have been decided very differently in virtually every other of the circuits in the United States, every single one, including the Second Circuit. He called himself an expert in constitutional law. He is not a lawyer. He is not a law professor, and he has not written anything on the First Amendment. I am a lawyer. I'm a 35-year long law professor, and I've written a book on the First Amendment. He's not a constitutional scholar, and he's not a lawyer, and he's not a law professor. So he said to you, don't lecture me on the First Amendment. I think I have more expertise. No, he doesn't, actually. As a matter of fact, I would say that you both have equal expertise. But you didn't know that because you probably didn't realize he didn't go to law school and he's not a law professor. And he used a misrepresentation. He made you think that he was a law professor, but he's not. He's taught at no law school in the United States, and no law school in the United States would have him teach, and certainly not a course in constitutional law.
Now, you may not.
What does it mean? Forget about protect. No, let's not hide behind that. Just what does the term
protected speech is very serious to me.
Norm, what does the term from the river to the sea imply?
Now you're asking me what it implies. I don't even know. Okay, I can't tell you what it implies. And in our Constitution,
you know exactly. You know precisely what it implies.
In our Constitution, you can't suppress speech because of what you think it implies.
They did not argue another exception to First Amendment freedoms. It was a mistake. The lawyers did not argue it in their appeal. There's Virginia versus Black, a Supreme Court case, which says that if you're engaged in speech that results in being a true threat or intimidation, that is not protected speech. If you're screaming, globalize the Intifada in front of Jews, if Jews are anywhere near anyone screaming, globalize the Intifada, That would be the same thing if you were screaming in front of African Americans at MIT, lynch blacks, lynch blacks, lynch blacks. Why? Because that is incitement to engage in violence. It's very clear. When you use the word intifada or the river to the sea, what does it mean in the reasonable mind of a person who hates Israel, right? And what it means to them is killing Jews and eliminating the Jewish presence from the river to the sea.
Well, maybe you would prefer it to be that way, but we're not yet a totalitarian.
Norm, what are your feelings about gay rights?
The same as my feelings about women's rights and the same as my feeling about human rights.
So if two gay men are walking down the streets of Ramallah, can they hold hands and can they kiss?
Probably in Ramallah, which is totally westernized. It's like a little New York. Probably in Ramallah, you can do anything. I've not been there.
You think so?
I have not been there since 2004.
Has he been there? I have. Has he been there? He's never been any of these places, and he's pretty sure of himself. And the answer is no. I don't know of anyone that thinks of Ramallah as a little New York. What he's saying is there are fewer Islamists in Ramallah and fewer terrorists, perhaps, than there are in Jenin and Nablus. He may be right. But to claim that two homosexuals could walk holding hands in Ramallah because it's as if they're walking in Greenwich Village in New York is preposterous. And someone would have to say they've been there and they've seen it. And unless he's saying that, it means nothing what he's saying. He seems to know that gay people exist freely in Ramallah. How? How does he know it? He just suspects it. So everything you've played me has all those elements in them. There isn't one thing that you played me that was not false for those reasons.
Okay, let's talk about Gaza. Two guys are gay. They want to hold hands. They want to kiss. They want to live together. How's that go down in Gaza?
Well, for the moment, the problem is the people in Gaza can't eat. So I'll worry about that.
No, come on, Norm. Don't deflect. Don't deflect. I'm just asking you a question.
In Auschwitz, can two men in the Auschwitz bunk, can they walk down the street and kiss? It's a stupid question.
Listen, right I don't see the equivalence here, Norm. Honestly, it's really about, my point is that
I see the equivalent that your country, I'm not even sure if you're Israeli. I don't know anything about you. I never asked. Israel,
I'm third generation Canadian.
A genocide in Gaza, and I think.
Listen, we haven't even gotten there. I'm just warming you up here, Norm. Okay, we're going to get to that.
Whether two Gazans can kiss walking down the street. First of all, there aren't any streets left in Gaza. Israel.
Listen, Norm. The point that I'm making is that there are values inside the United States, inside democracies that are protected, minorities are protected, people are protected, is that the rights of the LGBTQT community are protected.
Sir, with all due regard, I don't believe you know the history very well.
Usually when people say with all due regard or due respect, they mean absolutely no respect.
I'm 73 years old. So my memory goes back. Do you know in the United States, as late as 2000, which is not so long ago. I know if you're younger, it sounds like a long time ago, but for me, 2000 sounds so long ago. Up until 2000, what was called homosexual sodomy was not legal in our country. It was not legal. It was wrong.
Okay, great. So we've evolved.
Right. But it's only 25 years. It's only 25 years that's been legalized in our country. You take it as if.
I don't think the word is legalized. I think it's perhaps that there's no basis for criminalization. In the
United States, it was not constitutionally protected. In fact, in 1986.
Right. My point is, Norm, is for somebody who stands for moral values, for humanity, is that you tend to support people who don't respect those values. The same values that you have. I don't believe the people that you support represent those values. And to me, that's a dichotomy. To me, that's a double standard.
By people I support the right of people not to be subjected to genocide. That's correct.
Okay, but you still think that it's okay to have a slogan from the river to the sea, which implies total erasure of the Jewish homeland, total erasure of Jewish people, and genocide of the Jewish people.
It's not a question of whether I approve of that slogan. I have said many times, including at the Columbia encampment, I don't even know if you know anything about me, and you're not obliged to know anything about me. If you go on YouTube today and enter Norman Finkelstein Columbia encampment, you'll see me giving a presentation saying I don't agree with the slogan from the river to the sea. But you don't seem to understand the distinction between the right to express that slogan on the one hand, and on the other, whether or not I agree with it. Those are completely different things. The Supreme Court.
Norm, I think there are laws and there are restrictions. And you said at the beginning that the right to free speech is limited by one exception.
I said that exception is very narrowly circumscribed in our law. You have to show the threat of, quote, imminent lawless violence. Imminent.
I think we're living in that world right now. We're living in a world of lawlessness and of the anarchy of lawlessness.
In our constitutional law, thank goodness, for students chanting a slogan from the river to the sea to be deprived of the right to free speech. That is not in our constitutional.
I think that slogan is meant to incite violence, and therefore it subscribes to that exception.
Number one, I have no idea what that slogan is meant to do. And number two, number two, I know the slogan from the 1960s, the 1970s, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What happens to the Jews in that scenario? Some people will say, well, all it's about is everybody being free, but that's not what the slogan says. They want to they want to sweep away all the Jewish people. They want to destroy Israel. They want to, Yes, that's all true, and I can understand the enthusiasm. Obviously, I support the cause. I don't really care. They love that slogan because that slogan is so defiant. It's one of those that you can call in-your-face slogans. You don't seem to get the point. Even if it was meant to do that, our court said you have the right to advocate the violent overthrow of our government. Now, sir, that is not an ambiguous slogan. That's very straightforward. You have the right to call for the violent overthrow of our government. Okay. And our courts ruled that's protected speech.
Again, let me repeat myself. Not it in any way involves incitement of violence or engagement in violence. It's very clear. No, he's wrong. He's wrong. Every sentence he wrote, he said to you is wrong.
Norm, I want to switch things up here a little bit. We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back. I want to ask you a question because I really want to understand Norm Finkelstein.
I don't think you want to understand. You don't like certain.
I absolutely want to understand you. I want to understand. You don't like
certain slogans. I don't like certain slogans also. But
all right. Listen, Norm, I want to ask you a question. Do you believe in the Jewish story?
I have no idea what the Jewish story is. Now,
well, do you believe in the Exodus? Do you believe that Jews were slaves in Egypt and exited from Egypt?
Honestly, I haven't a clue. I've not studied it closely.
Do you believe that Judaism was formed as a result of these stories?
I have no idea.
Do you believe that Jews entered Egypt, entered the land of Israel 3 millennia ago?
I have a credo. Mao Zedong, who was a hero of my youth, he once said, no investigation, no right to speak. In other words, if you don't know what the F you're talking about, then shut the F up. I have not studied ancient history. So I am not going to make a judgment on those questions.
Fine. So I just wanted to understand where you're coming from. What you're saying is that you haven't studied it and therefore you do not have an opinion on it. However, scientifically and documentation would lead us to believe that these events occurred in some fashion or another and that a tribe known as the Jewish people entered into Israel and 3 millennia ago, and there was an establishment of the Jewish people in what is today the state of Israel.
You're free to believe that. It's constitutionally protected.
Okay. I'm not. No, it's not. It's not about what I'm free to believe. I'm a fact-based. I'm a fact-based person that looks for evidence, and I see evidence, archaeology, documentation.
And if I study this question, I would examine the same evidence and reach my conclusion.
Norm, how do you make a living today?
I've always made a living the same way. I've never had a full-time job. I've always been an itinerant scholar. I live a very minimalist existence. Fortunately, my parents lived a very minimalist existence, so I got accustomed to that growing up. In my home, in the winter, we would defrost. In my home, we would defrost the steak in the winter by putting it into the freezer. We lived on very minimal budget. And then I was fortunate to have been born in the 60s, or lived through the 1960s, in which one of the values was simplicity. I'm not saying many people preserve that value, but I did. So I had very little, very small needs.
You lost a bid for tenureship in 2007. Why was that?
You'd have to ask DePaul University.
Well, this was quite a public situation at the time.
Right.
I mean, you were pretty upset about that, right?
Was I upset about it? I thought it was unjust, but that's a legal determination. Emotionally, I think I was ready to leave DePaul.
But your views weren't necessarily universally accepted by the academic circles that you were within. Is that correct?
First of all, I would be very embarrassed if my views were universally accepted. It would mean that my presence on this planet would be redundant because everybody agrees with me, so I have nothing of interest to say. So the universal acceptance doesn't seem to me a very high standard or even a relevant standard. What I do know was at the time, I won the approval of my department. I won the approval of my college. It then went to the university level. What happened at that level, I don't know, and nobody knows. But something happened at that level, and at the third level of review, I was denied tenure. Exactly why, I don't know. The president.
But that seems to have haunted you since then as well.
Because it was a high-profile case, I became kind of toxic, and nobody would want to hire me.
And you had views. I mean, other people have had opinions about your views.
There were many people. Raoul Hilberg, who was the founder of the field of Holocaust studies, and was by far and away the most knowledgeable. He had a very strong opinion. His opinion was, to quote him, Norman Finkelstein's place in the whole history of writing history is safe. That I had been a victim of effectively a witch hunt. He said I paid a very big price, but what I was saying was true. So he had a strong opinion. And
so you must be pretty angry at the establishment.
Raoul Hilberg. I mean, why would you want? It's just a matter of curiosity to me. Why would you want to trivialize the opinion of a person who, in the face of a lot of public pressure in the 1950s, early 1950s, chose as his dissertation topic the destruction of the European Jews? At the time, he was told by his advisor at Columbia University. His advisor told him when he went over, his advisor was a very famous German sociologist, Franz Neumann, who wrote a classic book called The He-Myth. His advisor told him, don't do it you'll never get a job. And in the face of that, he sat down and mastered the entire record on the Nazi Holocaust in a fashion that has never been even remotely duplicated. And then he proceeded, to write the foundational work on the subject, which formed the basis for all subsequent scholarship. And what is your assessment of him? Quote, he must have been very angry at the establishment. You know, that is the assessment of such a vulgar, crude, Philistine. That's your bottom line? No, really.
I think anger can motivate people to do strange things. Anger can motivate you. Listen, Norm, you've been rejected. You've been rejected by the establishment, and that could become your life's work to disprove that.
I would consider it a mark of shame if I were accepted by the establishment.
I want to ask you a question. You wrote a book called The Holocaust Industry, and in this book, you claim, and this is also I saw a recent interview that you did with Candace Owens, and where it was repeated. You claim a couple things. You claim that there were only 100,000 survivors from the Shoah, from the Holocaust. You also claim that people have used the Holocaust and have exploited the Holocaust. Can you tell me what that means?
Well, number one, it's not my figure. The figure of under 100,000 Holocaust survivors comes from Henry Friedlander and Raoul Hilberg. Now, where did we get that figure? A Holocaust survivor, when I was growing up, a Holocaust survivor meant the following. You survived the ghettos, the death camps, or the labor camps. And usually it was all three by coincidence. So, for example, my mother and father were in the Warsaw Ghetto. After the uprising, they were deported to Majdanek concentration camp. My father then ended up in Auschwitz, where he was in the work side of the Auschwitz. My mother ended up in 2 slave labor camps. That's what a Holocaust survivor meant. If you were, for example, in the Soviet Union during World War II, you fled, when
as many did.
Yes, about 250,000. Then you were considered to have escaped the Holocaust. That was an escape from the Holocaust. None of my parents' friends would have ever dared say to them that they had endured what my parents endured during World War II. That was unthinkable. And that's how the Holocaust survivor was defined. Now, when the whole issue of Holocaust reparations came up, everybody suddenly discovered they were a Holocaust survivor. But that's not what the Holocaust survivor meant to the generation right after. And then
so you don't believe that somebody who had to flee in the opposite direction, and you don't believe that person who had to abandon his home and had to flee, whose parents or family were murdered, that they are Holocaust survivors?
Absolutely not. And as I said, all of my parents' circle of friends after World War II, because they never really assimilated to American life, all of their friends had survived, had come out of World War II. Either one, Lanya, she lived with a Christian family, obviously paid, their family was paid, but they lived with a Christian family. And then I could name Ginsburg, Horowitz, this, that. They were all in Russia during the war. They never called themselves Holocaust survivors. That never even came up. You see, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Multiple sources, including Yad Vashem.
Oh, stop! Yad Vashem is a source like the Institute for Soviet Studies under Stalin. It's just a political institution. There's no scholarly value.
And some would say your statements are offensive, and some would say that it's a manipulation of truth.
You know what's offensive? I'll tell you, it's offensive to say the Nazi murder machine was very efficient. It was an assembly-like, factory-like, assembly line-like, factory-like extermination of the Jews. And it's like my late mother used to say, if everybody who claims to be a Holocaust survivor is one, then who did Hitler kill? You didn't survive it. On my mother's side, every single member of her family was exterminated except her. On my father's side, every single member of his family was exterminated except him. But now, if you walk the streets of New York, well, not anymore because it's 80 years ago, but there was a period during the 1980s and 90s, everyone claimed to be a Holocaust survivor. That's offensive. That's deeply offensive. You know what that is? Brace yourself. That is Holocaust denial. When you inflate the numbers of survivors to the point of absurdity, that's Holocaust denial. I am the Holocaust affirmer. You and your Yad Vashem are the Holocaust deniers.
Okay, well, thanks for making that clear. I want to ask you something. Do you believe that all Germans and Poles supported the final solution, supported this systematic elimination of Jews?
When I was writing an essay, which later turned into a book with a co-author, on Hitler's willing Daniel Goldhagen's Hitler's willing executioners, I read everything there was to be read on that particular subject, because the essential Goldhagen thesis was exterminating the Jews was baked into the DNA of Germans, and they were straining at the bit to exterminate all the Jews. And then Hitler gave them the green light, and they proceeded to do what they wanted to do for centuries.
So you say you say it was part of their DNA, that it was embedded in them.
Sir.
They were just looking for a green light. They were just looking for someone to come in to do that.
I don't think you're listening to a word I'm saying. Unfortunately.
No, I'm hearing you.
You obviously aren't. I said that's what Daniel Goldhagen's thesis was in Hitler's willing executioners. And then I proceed to examine that claim, that proposition. And I said I read everything that was available on the subject over a sustained period of time. Okay? And I would say, first of all, I have to be careful. I stopped reading on the subject approximately the year 2001 or 2. So I haven't looked at the last 25 years of scholarship on the subject, and the consensus might have changed. The consensus as of when I read on the subject, again a quarter of a century ago, the consensus was that if you chart on the graph Hitler's rise to power, Hitler was polling, the Nazi Party was polling like 3% of the vote. Everything changed with the Great Depression. With the collapse of the economy in 1929, his party started to gain momentum. And the role that anti-Semitism played in his actual rise to power seemed to have been a side issue. It was a secondary issue. The primary issue was he promised a solution to the economic catastrophe that had befallen the German society and the German working class in particular.
And in doing so, he scapegoated the Jew.
Yes, that's correct. But the question is, again, it's a scholarly question, and I've looked at the scholarly literature. The question was, what was the primary motivation of Germans who voted for Hitler? Now, was there anti-Semitism in German society? Of course. Was there violent, homicidal, the expression that Goldhagen used, I found it crude. Was there eliminationist anti-Semitism in German society? Judging by the evidence, the answer is no, because it was a balance for the Germans between they didn't like Jews, for sure. They didn't like Jews. However, they liked to maintain the veneer of civilization. And
Joseph,
so if you look at, for example, the German reaction to Kristallnacht in 1938, the German reaction was overwhelmingly negative, partly because they thought it was a very crude behavior for a German to go around smashing synagogues and smashing windows, and partly because they thought of it as an embarrassment to German civilization.
But there was an indifference. But there still was an indifference.
I would say it's correct to say they didn't like Jews, but there are different levels of not like. You have to go. Have to leap or traverse quite a distance.
Joseph Goebbels was the infamous Nazi propagandist. What was the goal of his anti-Jewish propaganda? What do you think? I believe that. What do you think was the strategic goal behind his propaganda?
There are different interpretations. Some people say Hitler's desire to exterminate the Jews goes all the way back to the original party platform of the Nazi Party. Other people say there were different goals at different points in time. At some point, they wanted to expel the Jews from Germany somewhere else. At another point, and again, I've not looked at the literature in 25 years, but there was always a debate among the scholarly community on two questions: when and why. When was it decided to exterminate the Jews, and why it was decided to exterminate the Jews? The when and the why, as of a quarter century ago, those two questions remained open. There was a lot of this.
But this propaganda, it served to demonize the Jewish people and normalize an idea of the Jewish people, and I believe that it created a moral indifference by German population. Would you agree with that?
I would say it was roughly what the Israeli government did after October 7th, but
No, hold on a second. I'm asking you, I didn't ask you about that. I'm asking you about what the Nazi propaganda was a calculated strategic play to demonize and normalize anti-Semitic sentiment.
That's for sure. They were anti-Semites. They were hardcore anti-Semites.
Okay. Is there a difference between the propaganda today and the propaganda then? Is the propaganda today that we see demonstrated, again, back to the slogan from the river to the sea, does that not have a way of, does that not pivot an incitement and elimination of Jewish people in using that propaganda to normalize that action so that the strategy is to create a moral indifference in general society to do so?
I would agree with the judge in the case regarding MIT. That particular slogan is susceptible to multiple interpretations. From the river to the sea can simply mean one single uniform democratic state from the river to the sea. It's perfectly plausible to interpret it that way. I happen to think personally that the slogan is too ambiguous, and that in politics one should have very concrete slogans, not open to interpretation.
So what about slogans like child murderers or genocidal that are unproven and from both? What about slogans like that? Are they not used to dehumanize and to create a moral atrocity?
Actually, they're used to describe actual actions. If you are a sniper or a regular Israeli soldier targeting children, let's be very clear.
You have information about this. You have evidence to the fact that Israeli snipers are targeting children.
Actually, the New York Times found the evidence
Come on, Norm.
Right.
These are false narratives. These are lies. These are false narratives to support an idea to justify this type of propaganda. You know that.
And there were no gas chambers at Auschwitz. I know.
Are you being
false narrative? I said even the New York Times editorial board found the evidence convincing enough that Israeli soldiers were targeting.
What kind of firsthand knowledge do you have of this, Norm? Because you speak about it in the sense that you have some. I have firsthand knowledge. Do you have firsthand knowledge about the fact that Israeli soldiers? You're saying that they were commissioned or trained or that they were instructed to target Palestinian children? Are you serious?
Actually, your Israeli society is so genocidal that you don't even have to give them the orders. That's their reflex. You have to know, since you claim to be, I don't know if you're an Israeli. I don't know where you're from. I know nothing about you. But you're surely aware of the poll that was taken among Israelis in which 47% of Israeli Jews said, if the IDF conquers a city, it should kill everybody in the city. You're aware of that, correct?
Why not show us the op-ed? He said the editorial board of the New York Times had actually said that they saw evidence of targeting of children. Where is that editorial page? What date was it? Just tell us. We'll look at it. The New York Times never made such a conclusion. He just says that because he thinks that you have no reply to that. As much as the New York Times is another self-hating organization, hates Israel, hates Jews, even they, where is that? I don't even that even they aren't that absurd. They're not preposterous or grotesque as Finkelstein. He can say it, but I would say the only first question is, can you hold up for the audience and read from the editorial that you're claiming? Read it to us. Tell me what you're talking about. There was a book written by another Finkelstein academic. Again, I don't know what that means, who teaches at Rutgers. She wrote a book that won a book award, which tells you a lot about how much people hate Jews. That's called The Right to Maim. And it's actually a book that makes the argument that the IDF, deliberately harvests the organs of Palestinians and deliberately fires at the legs of children to maim them. There isn't one sourced footnote in the entire book. Not one.
Norm, I'm not
you're not aware of that poll?
I'm not aware of that at all.
Because that poll was reported everywhere.
Which poll is that? Can you just tell us what poll was taken? Can you give me a date, a time? Like, can you give me something?
Computer now. Just type in 47% Israeli Jews say everyone should be killed in a city that's conquered by the IDF.
Look, if it is a poll, it's not a real pollster. You can always find a poll. This is the problem. In the internet, you can always find something you can point to. Anything on Wikipedia, you can find something that somehow is supposed to be legitimate. If there was such a poll, the point that I think you were making is it was probably taken immediately after October 7th. You have to look at the barbarism of October 7th. You can't look away from it. You start with the barbarism of October 7th and then ask what other people on the planet wouldn't have felt the same way as the Israelis. Remember, this goes back to everything that he said in everything you've played for me. They have one thing in common. Everyone knows, he said, there is evidence. And the answer is he doesn't produce the evidence. He just says it. So he does two things manipulative. He uses the words international law as if he knows the law. He doesn't cite the law. He just says international law. And he uses the word evidence very loosely, and he forgets to tell you the evidence.
I think people are very emotionally charged. There's a lot has been said, but what actually happens, Norm, Israel, the IDF, Norm, the IDF is one of the most moral armies in the world. That what other army knocks on the door, tells people that what they're about to do, and evacuate citizens? Listen, it's not the fault of the IDF that Hamas terrorists use hospitals and schools to store weapons and what have you, and to launch attacks against Israel from civilian areas. There are definitely is going to be collateral damage, but under no uncertain terms. And this, Norm, is one of those falsities that is, I think, an incitement of hatred and an incitement to violence of the Jews, where we go ahead and where people like yourself propagate propaganda and support propaganda that are complete lies. They are not factual. They are not factual. Show me where. Don't tell me about polls. Show me how you come to the evidentiary fact that Israeli soldiers are targeting Palestinian children.
I think I just told you. The New York...
From a poll.
No, I didn't say that, sir.
From the New York Times.
I'm having a little problem here because you're like a typical Holocaust denier. You are so fanatically committed to your point of view that you have no interest in evidence. There is now voluminous evidence.
I am interested. Show me the evidence.
I just told you, sir, that when several doctors who served in Gaza, foreign doctors who served in Gaza, noticed, doctors, nurses, and other medical personnel, noticed this pattern of children being shot in the head and in the chest with no other shrapnel damage to the body. And their x-rays were presented then.
Remember, this goes back to everything that he said and everything you've played for me. They have one thing in common. Everyone knows, he said, there is evidence. And the answer is he doesn't produce the evidence. He just says it. So he does two things manipulative. He uses the words international law as if he knows the law. He doesn't cite the law. He just says international law. And he uses the word evidence very loosely, and he forgets to tell you the evidence. It means nothing what he's saying.
How many children? How many? Are these the same children, by the way? Are these the same children who were shown in photographs as evidence to starvation in Gaza? Do you recall the reports from the Gaza Health? I'm just asking you. Are these the same? Do you recall the reports from the Gaza Ministry where they posted pictures of children who are emaciated and claimed that this is the result of starvation in Gaza as a direct result of Israel's policy to starve out?
Sir, I'm curious about something. There's an organization called Save the Children. Okay? Do you think it's an anti-Semitic? Is it a anti-Semitic organization?
Look, you're asking me a question. There's
another organization called the Mercy Corps. Do you think it's
okay? I'm just asking you a question. I just want to know. There are reports.
You asked me.
You believe that people in Gaza are starving, right? As a result of Israel. That it's Israel, the consequence of Israel's policy of genocide to create starvation in Gaza. This comes up rhetoric and in a report. Do you agree with that statement? Is that your claim? Do you feel that statement is correct? That Israel is causing a crisis of starvation?
Actually, it passed under the current standard. It's a complex standard, but it passed starvation and it fell into the category of famine.
Okay. Do you recollect media pictures that were propagated around the world showing children who are emaciated and were evidence of the starvation? Is that correct?
My mode of inquiry, for better or for worse, is not pictures. My mode of inquiry is there are about 20 UN or UN-related organizations or international relief organizations working in Gaza. Everything, you're going to have to let me finish, and if you're not going to let me finish, then the conversation is finished. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Everything from the International Committee of the Red Cross to UNICEF to Save the Children to the Food and Agricultural Organization to the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights. There is a consensus, and then the consensus extends to Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, B'Tselem. The consensus includes quite prominent scholars of the Nazi Holocaust. The consensus across the board was, and that consensus began already in November 2023, 2 years ago. that, quote, Israel was using starvation as a weapon of war. Now, there's only two possibilities. They can all be lying, or what seems to me the more plausible explanation is it's actually happening, and that's why they all agree on it.
So why would they present evidence? Why would they, if that is the case, and they're confident in their assertion, why would they produce evidence of emaciated children that in fact had nothing to do with starvation in Gaza? Why would that be their evidence?
When you say,
you know, Norm, you know that according to various European newspapers, and is very accepted that an investigation took place that found that the pictures circulated as evidence of famine and starvation was misreported, and that the children that were shown, hold on, let me finish, Norm, let me finish, because I'm fact-based here, that the children who were shown, were actually treated at hospitals, and that the campaign of those images overlooked the medical conditions that these children suffered from various end-stage diseases, cerebral palsy, that they exploited these children's diseases, and they do it all the time, Norm. The propaganda, these guys are masters at propaganda and at covering up what really is happening, and you know that. And I got to tell you something, because I want to tell you, Norm, I have interviewed soldiers. I have seen it with my own eyes. The convoys of aid that have been transferred into Gaza. And do you know who the IDF, and I know this from personal experience, do you know who the IDF is situated in there, risking their lives to protect Gazan citizens' access to that food? Because guess who attacks those convoys? Guess who takes that food?
I'm sure you believe all this, just as
come on. It's not what
as I'm sure you believe Israel is the most moral army in the world. You've said that. Just as you believe many things. Just as the Nazis believed exactly what you're saying. Actually, the Nazis were more honest than you. I have to say that.
Really? You're comparing me to the Nazis.
I would say you're worse.
I'm worse than this type of equivocation. This type of equivalence, Norm, discredits you. It discredits you. I'm not saying
equivalency. I would say you're worse.
I'm worse. Why? Because I investigate facts. Because I work with facts. I work with evidentiary facts. You work with hearsay, and you work with propaganda.
You read an article in Barry Weiss's propaganda outfit called The Free Press, which claims there's no starvation in Gaza, and all the pictures are fake, and that's your facts against saying the children.
No, that is not my facts, Norm. I'm an I am on the ground investigating.
And that's your fact-based proof against Save the Children, UNICEF, the Food and Agriculture Organization, Doctors Without Borders, the UN Human Rights Chief, against all of them, this grand anti-Semitic conspiracy against all of them, including every UN organization.
So you think the IDF?
All of them. You believe an article by Barry Weiss in the Free Press. Yeah, you're fact-based. You're fact-based.
I find it insulting. I find it insulting.
A flat earther and a Holocaust denier.
So you've compared me to a Holocaust. You've claimed I'm a Holocaust denier. You've told me that I'm worse than the Nazis. Why? Because I have investigated. I have not based my beliefs in articles.
Sir,
Norm, have you been to Israel? Have you been to Gaza?
Have I been there? I guess you don't know much about my history, which is fine. Why should you?
No, I do know that you were banned from Israel with a 10-year ban that expired in 2018. I want to know if you have been to Israel in recent years.
I'm banned.
Currently banned?
Yes, I've been banned since 2004.
I thought that was a 10-year ban.
I've attempted through places like Jordan to re-enter. I was not denied entry.
I can't imagine why. Do you consider yourself, Norm, do you consider yourself a proud American?
I don't consider myself a proud anything.
Have you accused America of genocide?
Have I accused? I don't even think it's a matter of accusation. I think it's a factual matter that the native population of the United States would, by current definitions of genocide, would be considered the victims of a genocide. Yeah.
Do you think that America's response to Pearl Harbor was genocide on Japan?
I would say that probably by a wide margin, the single biggest war crime committed committed during World War II was the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The single incident. Yeah.
So, but do you accuse America of genocide?
Listen, you really are, I have to tell you, sir, you're barking up the wrong tree. I was involved in the anti-war movement.
I'm just asking you.
Where we accused the United States of committing genocide in Vietnam on a daily basis.
I'm well aware of your of your feelings about that, and I'm well aware of what you. But I want to know in more recent history. What about 9/11? After 9/11, Norm, when everything that happened, did you accuse America of genocide?
It depends on where and when you're talking about. I think there's a good case to be made that in Iraq, comprehensively, the U.S. was guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. I don't even know what the current figures are for the number of people who were killed in Iraq or the number of people who were killed in Afghanistan. But
was that an act of genocide from America? Did America commit genocide?
I can't answer that question because
was America defending itself?
It has not. You can defend yourself and still commit genocide. There's no contradiction between those.
So where does that line? I want to ask you something.
It's when
Hamas penetrated a border and slaughtered and brutally killed 1,200 people who had nothing to do with the political system, nothing to do with, they were there celebrating, they were there living in kibbutzim, they were there. Was Israel committing an act of genocide by defending itself against Hamas terrorists?
From day one, Israel made clear it was not defending itself against Hamas. When your prime minister, Mr. Netanyahu, invoked Amalek.
You don't know. Okay, go ahead.
When he invoked Amalek,
yeah,
that wasn't targeting Hamas. That was targeting every man, woman, and child in Gaza. When your president, Mr. Herzog, when he said this distinction between civilians and combatants in Gaza is fake. He said they could have overthrown Hamas whenever they wanted. They didn't. They are all guilty, said Mr. Herzog. When Mr. Gallant said we're not admitting any food, water, fuel, or electricity into Gaza, that wasn't targeting Hamas. That was targeting everyone in Gaza. They were very clear about their genocidal aims from day one. And 2 years later, you would have to say they were remarkably prescient of what was to come.
Under international law, if you participate, if you engage and aid material support, you have joined the fight. So if you're gang raping an Israeli girl in southern Israel, you've joined the fight. It doesn't matter if you don't carry a gun. That's not the standard for genocide. The standard is, do you have specific intent to wipe out an entire people? And the minute that Israel created humanitarian corridors that discussion was over. You cannot create humanitarian corridors for people and be interested in wiping out a specific people by sending text messages and voicemails and leaflets that said, your building tomorrow is scheduled for an operation to eliminate the building. We urge you to go to this particular corridor. At that point, the conversation was over. If you're warning people to get out of the way, then you are not committing genocide.
Let's look and see what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said after Pearl Harbor. When we're done with this, the only place Japanese is going to be spoken is in the history books. Or take what President Obama said during the fight against ISIS. We will eradicate this cancer. So it turns out that speaking tough talk about your enemy does not demonstrate genocidal intent in and of itself. Joe Biden actually said during the bombing of Serbia, which nobody even remembers, once war starts, anything is permissible. Now, perhaps Norman Finkelstein believes that World War II and the war against ISIS and the war against the Serbs were all genocides or intended genocides. That's not how we conventionally think about this. And angry statements certainly do not a genocide make or an intent to genocide. And I should mention that when he talked about Amalek, surely Norman Finkelstein does not think Gaza or Gazans perpetrated October 7th. Right? It was Hamas, surely. So presumably, Prime Minister Netanyahu was speaking about Hamas. Hamas is a terror group. Killing off a terror group is not genocide. It does not count as a people or group under the Genocide Convention.
Gaza is no more. Gaza is gone. There's no Gaza anymore. 95% of the housing is gone. 70% of all the other infrastructure is gone. How many people were killed? Probably will take quite a lot of time to calculate. They did it, what they did in the last 2 years is exactly what they said they would do. Had nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas was a sideshow. It's been 2 years. Are you aware of a single battle in Gaza? I'm not. I follow it every day. I haven't heard one battle in Gaza. Israel loses about one soldier every 3 to 4 days in Gaza. One soldier every 3 to 4 days. About 75 Gazans are killed on a daily basis. A ratio of one to, I forgot the exact ratio now. That's not a war. That's an extermination. It has nothing to do with a war. How many Hamas people they killed? I would say it's completely random. They are.
What do you think? What is your opinion? What was your opinion on October 7th? When October 7th happened, how did you feel about that?
Oh, well, you have to remember exactly how information came out. On October 7th, it was said that terrorists had had broken the gates of Gaza, and the first figures that came out were about 50 Israelis killed. Go back and check. I know exactly. I've studied it. About 50 Israelis were killed. It wasn't until about 5 days later, the numbers increased each day. It went from 50, it then went to about 100, then 200, and then about 5 days later, the figures start to hover around 1,200.
I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, I just don't. He's essentially saying that 1,200 Jews were, whatever the number of 1,200, 2,000 Jews were not killed. And among it's 1,200, I think that's the number. What he's really saying, only 50 were killed and not 1,200. He would also, if you give him a chance, would have said that gang raping is not what happened and beheadings is not what happened. That's what he's really saying. He's saying that Israel is lying, that they simply do what Hamas did and what 2,000 civilians didn't take place. And Israel created a fake crime as a pretext to go kill Palestinians.
When I heard that Gaza militants had broken through the concentration camp called Gaza, well, I'm using your former head.
I'm sorry, but go ahead.
I know you're sorry, sir, but I'm quoting.
I'm sorry for your disillusionment, but sir, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I think what you should be sorry about, sir, is the facts. Giora Island, who you surely know, and was the head of Israel's national security. No, allow me to finish, because you don't like to hear facts. Giora Island in 2004, before Israel had imposed the blockade of Gaza in 2006, Giora Island said, you can Google it right now, Giora Island, March 2004, he described Gaza to American officials as, quote, a huge concentration camp. That's Giora Island, who I think we can agree is not a peacenik. And we can agree he's not an anti-Semite. Correct? That's his words, not mine. All right? Now, when I had heard that Hamas militants had broken through the gates of Gaza concentration camp to, quote, Giora Island, yes, I was very happy, euphoric, as I would if my parents had broken through the gates of Auschwitz.
Concentration camp? I don't know how to respond to that. There's not a single Jew that lived in Gaza since 2005. If it's a concentration camp, it's a concentration camp imposed by Egypt also, because Egypt has the same restrictions on the border for air, sea, and naval blockade to make sure that Hamas, which is not interested in building hospitals or universities, but interested in building tunnels and weapons and rockets. So Egypt is doing the same thing. It's moral inversion to say, let's use the language that was worst thing that happened to Jews and then project it on the Jews. Concentration camps, projected on the Jews. Genocide, Holocaust, projected on the Jews. If there's ever an example of a self-loathing, self-hating Jew, it's him. It's a guy who's saying, my parents were Holocaust survivors, but I'm going to call the Holocaust about that Jews are creating a Holocaust. It's the Holocaust didn't happen to us. We're doing it to other people. We're the ones that are creating concentration camps. It didn't happen to my parents. It's despicable.
So they broken through the gates. Do you say it and you call it look at this equivalent to concentration camps and to Nazis?
Go have Giora Island on your program and quarrel with him. I'm quoting him. I think the head of your National Security Council knows what it's like in Gaza, and that's his description. I don't change the subject. Very painful. Very painful. As the British proverb,
it's not a painful thing. It's not a painful thing. What is
British proverb says,
Norm.
Facts are stubborn things. Facts are stubborn things. I am quoting the best sources I know of.
Let's take a step back for a second. So, Gaza, physically, right? There's one thing. There's a couple of facts over here that I think we have to establish. That Gaza doesn't just share a border with Israel. Gaza also shares a border with Egypt. What have you done to accuse Egypt of as maintaining Gaza as a concentration camp?
Egypt is a military dictatorship. It's a loathsome government which came into power by committing the largest single massacre in Egyptian history. The massacre, which probably the numbers run between 1,000 and 3,000 people. The very non-violent, unarmed civilians were wiped out by Sisi when he came into power. So the very last thing I am going to do is to defend the Egyptian government. Having said that,
I'm not asking you to defend them. I'm asking you to share responsibility here.
Egypt has no control over what goes in and goes out of Rafah. That is, everybody agrees. Israel controls what goes in and what goes out. There was one issue,
including all the weapons that were used on October 7th.
Stop. You just don't know what you're talking about. You think Morsi supported Hamas? Excuse me, you thought Sisi supported Hamas? Sisi hated Hamas because Hamas was an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is exactly what Sisi exterminated when he came into power.
All right.
So the idea that Sisi was supporting Hamas is so ridiculous. You have to be a complete moron to be making statements like that. You have to be a complete moron to be making statements like that. If you wanted to say that Morsi under the Brotherhood was turning a blind eye, okay, there's an argument there. But to say that Sisi was, it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
Norm, what is going on today? What is going on today in Canada? Let's forget. I'm not going to go there with you. I'm not going there with you with Hamas and what happened in Israel and Jeanette, because I don't think we're going to get. You've got a different set of facts, a different set of ideas that you're dealing with.
You have nothing. You don't have a counter set of facts.
Why would you say that? Why would you say I have nothing?
Because any person of sound mind who has any knowledge of what happened the last 2 years and what preceded it, but let's take the last 2 years, to describe Israel as the most moral army in the world is a crackpot. You hear me? A crackpot, a lunatic. But unfortunately, that's Israel.
I'm not the one who sounds like a crackpot right now.
It's truth, because the IDF goes, when it is in action against the enemies of Israel, its officers are required to jump through more hoops to satisfy the lawyers and the ethicists to whom they answer within this structure than any other army. Compared to what, say what the United States Army and its allies did in Iraq and in the war, against, ISIS. The IDF has far more scruples. One of the former chiefs of staff of the United States Armed Forces said that the IDF is the gold standard when it comes to these issues. So to claim that it is not the most moral army goes against the facts, and it's just ideology. It's just, you're saying that the only reason why people say that is because they think Israel is intrinsically evil, because they think it has no right to exist, because they think one Jewish state on the planet is one too many.
Listen, Norm, forget that. Listen. I got to tell you something. If you would do your investigation, and if you would do your investigation and research to the lengths that Israel goes to as a humanistic army, they are one of the most moral army in the world. But you don't want to believe that. Norm, let me ask you a question. What do you think of what's going on around Canada and the United States? All of the protests, all these progressives that have made this partnership with the jihad, that are, how do you think that is constructive?
I think it was insufficient, including for myself. There was an ongoing genocide, and I don't believe that sufficient.
What about other, and let me ask you, what about other genocides that are going on? What about other, and I'm not saying what about other as if there is a genocide in Israel, but there are true genocides going on around the world. What have you done about the Sudanese? What have you done about the Ethiopians? What have you done about other places? Where is your voice? Where is your voice when it comes to these wars that are taking place? What is going on in other places in the world? Where is your voice in that? Where are the protests?
I would say in the course of my life, I've given voice to many genocides. As I said, I started out in the anti-war movement with Vietnam. I was involved with the struggles in Central America. I only came to Israel-Palestine relatively late in life, and the only reason I stuck to it is because I'm not a quitter.
You're not a quitter. All right. I'll give you that. So you've built much of your scholarship on Benny Morris's research, and when Morris recanted and said his earlier work contained errors and that there was no systematic expulsion policy in 1948, why do you still rely on his original findings?
Well, the answer is simple, and I've written extensively on it. I have a long analysis of Morris. It's called History by Subtraction. And in fact, I gave it to Morris. Promised when we were in a public debate. Morris said on air he would respond. I sent him the entire analysis, he refused. Do you know why I rely on the early Morris and not the late Morris? It's a very simple reason.
And why is that?
The early Morris is documented. He loved Ingham archives. He was a true historian, loved, as the expression has it, to muck in archives. Came up with a voluminous amount of evidence to support his assertions. Some of them were maybe less credible than others, but you can't deny Morris did a lot of legwork. The problem is, I call it history by subtraction, because he changed all of his opinions 180 degrees, but didn't provide any new evidence.
Why? Why did he change his opinion?
Because Benny Morris made I don't want to get into him now because it's personalizing it, but since you asked me a question, I'll give you my personal opinion. Benny Morris made a fundamental decision at some point in his life. The decision was he wasn't leaving Israel. Others who were on the left, a lot of them left. They went elsewhere. He decided, for reasons I can't speculate on, he decided he wants to stay in Israel. And he doesn't want to be a pariah. He doesn't want to be marginalized. He likes to be part of the center.
Benny Morris is no shrinking wallflower. He went up against the system for decades. He's not afraid of anybody. If he believed that his evidence doesn't require any other re-examination, he wouldn't do it. He must think that there was something flawed. This doesn't help his career. This isn't good for him. He made his career as a revisionist historian. And now all of a sudden he's come back and said, you know what? I think I drew the wrong conclusions. Guess who's not a historian? Norman Finkelstein. So here we go. Here's another example. He's not a historian. So he's now telling you, he's now a psychologist. He's a psychiatrist. He's telling you what's inside the mind of Benny Morris, a person who is not qualified to evaluate because he's not a historian and he's not a legitimate intellectual. I'm going to grant Benny Morris, who is a legitimate academic, the right to change his mind. That's what a free thinker does. A true liberal does. He changed his mind, looked at the old evidence and saw it in a different light. If he was not legitimate, he would hold fast to what he said at the beginning. I think what he's saying, changing his mind, is more legitimate. He's saying, in time, I took another look at this as a historian might, and I'm drawing now a different set of conclusions that contradict what I said originally. Does it make me look bad? I don't care. I want the truth is what matters to me most.
Norm, is Israel a sovereign nation state in your mind?
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay. And do you believe that the Palestinians have a right to statehood?
That's what the International Court of Justice decided in two of its decisions. That's what the UN General Assembly decided, and that's what the UN Security Council decided. So under the law, the answer is, just as Israel is a sovereign, independent state, the law states that the Palestinians are a people has the right to self-determination.
He didn't tell you the law. He forgot to mention there is no law. This is the problem that we hear all the time. You have people say, under international law, the answer always is, okay, can you tell me what law you're talking about? Obviously, there's a law. Where is it? Yes, it is true that there have been resolutions passed in an anti-Semitic United Nations condemning Israel but there is no law. Resolution 181 of the United Nations. Remember that resolution that divided Israel into a Palestinian, an Arab, not Palestinian, an Arab and a Jewish state was rejected by the Palestinians. So for him to invoke Resolution 181, which it sounds like what he's doing, he sounds like he's saying there's a two states. And I'm saying that's 1948. That's a resolution that was completely abrogated by the Arabs. And they've since then turned down 5 other offers of statehood. He uses the words international law as if he knows the law. He doesn't cite the law. He just says international law.
the Palestinians have the right of self-determination in what's called the occupied Palestinian territory, which comprises the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, in its entirety.
Yes, did the United States General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, yes, that's what they do for a living. They vote on things to condemn Israel and to condemn the West. So yeah, I mean, they've made such rulings. The Palestinians have to demonstrate that they are worthy of a state, that they are nation builders and statesmen, that their intentions are not just killing Jews, but building a homeland for themselves. And at no point have they ever surrendered their rejectionist, violence, calls to violence and calls for the elimination of a Jewish state. So for instance, when they say we have self-determination with the right of return, that's code for saying, and to eliminate a Jewish democracy in Israel, to eliminate Israel's self-determination. Most Palestinians, if you call them Palestinians, they didn't even arrive in that area of Middle East until the 20th century. So when people talk about centuries in general, they're not. The vast majority of the Palestinians who ended up living in the occupied territories, disputed territories, showed up after the beginning of Zionism, when Jews started buying land from the Ottoman Empire and started building stuff.
Do you think, the Palestinian Authority has controversial policies. One of them is a pay-for-slay policy that provides lifetime pensions. You smirk.
Yeah.
Lifetime pensions for people who commit acts of terror. Just a moment, please. Just a moment, please. The Palestinian Authority does not recognize Israel as a sovereign nation state, nor does it recognize Israel's right to self-determination or right to defend itself. Norman Finkelstein, what would your advice be towards a peaceful resolution, towards a two-state, towards whatever solution you think is needed in the Middle East? If you were advising the Palestinian Authority, what would your advice be today?
First of all, let's get back to what you said, and we'll go to your question. Israel's society is an entire society of pay to slay.
Come now.
The soldiers.
Listen, Norm, please. You're twisting truth here, okay? You're twisting truth. It is a known fact. It is a known fact that the Palestinian Authority has a pay-for-slay policy.
You have an army of child killers. You have an army of...
Norm, I got to tell you something. It's lunacy. It's absolutely shameful.
The Israeli soldiers, you have a citizen army.
Look at.
So you have a citizen army.
What would you like? Would you like me to agree with you, Norm? Would you like me to agree with you? Because that's not my question to you. My question to you is, what would you advise?
I'm going to end this. Not because of abrupt, but what I realize is that you're going to edit this. You're not going to put the whole thing up. And what you're going to do is you'll edit out everything that you can't answer. I agree to go from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and you are not faring very well in this conversation, so I suspect...
Why do you say I'm not faring well?
In my opinion, constitutionally protected opinion. In my opinion, you're not faring very well. So I'm concerned now that a very edited version of this conversation will be posted, in which case I have the right to say, you know what? I don't want to continue.
But I just asked you a question, Norm. I asked you, what would you do? What would you tell the Palestinian Authority?
I'm recording this. Are you making a commitment to posting the full 2 hours?
Yes.
Okay, then let's proceed.
So what is your message to the Palestinian Authority?
The Palestinian Authority, okay, we have it on tape now. You will post the full 2 hours unexpurgated.
Listen, Norm, you like to be a bully, right? You're like to be a bully. I'm just asking you a question, dude. I'm just asking you a question. What is your advice to the Palestinian Authority? If you could advise them on Israel, what would that advice be?
It's a kleptocracy and a gerontocracy. It's a klepto-gerontocracy. It's the subcontractors of Israel. It does Israel's bidding. You created the Palestinian Authority.
You can't answer a question. That is delusional. That is delusional,
Palestinian
Norm.
Authority loathes me. I was debating an Al Arabiya member of the Palestinian.
Okay, let's
I was
put it this way.
debating with Al Arabiya, member of the Palestinian Authority.
Somehow,
I called him a stooge, a slave, and a reptile. They don't like me. So actually, as a factual matter, I've never even been on Al Jazeera the last 2 years. They don't like me either. So I speak my mind.
You got a lot of people that don't like you. Who likes you? So who likes you? Who likes Norman Finkelstein?
During my tenure battle, surprisingly, Raoul Hilberg, who was a right-wing Republican, he was very generous in his support for me. Then I would say John Dugard, who's one of the world's leading authorities on the Israel-Palestine conflict, Dugard said, I am the most knowledgeable person on the subject on the planet Earth. And I would say, judging by the numbers of people who show up when I speak, I would say there are a lot of ordinary people who believe in me, who trust me, both factually and on a moral level.
Okay,
so
fine.
I don't feel I'm doing
just,
very badly in the popularity contest, except among people in power and ruling elites. There, I don't feel very
Okay,
well.
so let's get this straight. The Palestinian Authority hates you. Okay, and you dislike the Palestinian Authority. How about Hamas? Do you like Hamas?
I think Hamas falls in the same category, roughly, as the slave revolts in the United States. They are religious fanatics, as were the people who conducted the slave revolt. On the other hand, I believe that under the circumstances, just as I personally, as an American, would find it very hard to criticize Nat Turner, the slave rebel, even though his first order, which everybody agrees on, and the scholarship, his first order was kill all white people. That's the order he gave. Nonetheless, when you examine the conditions in which Nat Turner had to live, the fact that he was born a slave, he languished as a slave, and he will die a slave, under those conditions, it's very difficult to condemn Nat Turner. I would say in the case of the people of Gaza, everybody burst the gates of Gaza. Everyone. They were all born into a concentration camp. They languished in the concentration camp. And as of October 6th, 2023, they were destined to die in the concentration camp.
In order for the analogy to work, it would have to be that you saw Jews that owned land on Gaza and had put Gazans in chains and had complete control over them. So they had no agency. And so, of course, they couldn't build tunnels. And of course, they couldn't pollute rockets. I've never heard of an enslaved people that fire rockets and also build tunnels. If it's really an open-air prison, it's one that didn't work because they somehow were able to build tunnels and create a warehouse of weapons.
So it's very difficult for me, just as I find it difficult to condemn Nat Turner,
that concentration camp, by the way, that is the responsibility of whom?
The concentration camp?
Yeah.
Who was the one who was responsible for whatever went in and whatever went out? Who was responsible
so you think Israel is solely responsible for what has happened inside of Gaza?
Well, there are aspects of it where they had no control.
I'm asking you, who's really responsible? Do you think Hamas is responsible? Do you think Hamas?
I think the Israeli genocidal regime was responsible for sure.
The conditions of the Palestinians are because of the choices of the Palestinians. They've gotten billions and billions of foreign aid, but instead of spending it on bettering the lives of their people, they spent it on preparing for and waging war on Israel. And it was a terrible decision because it's not a war they were going to win, and they didn't win it. This is an absurd claim because it takes away all agency from the Palestinians themselves. They've made many choices over the last 100 years. They've all been really terrible choices, but they were their choices. And they're still making that choice, to the extent that they are, in terms of choosing to continue this struggle. And as long as they do, they're going to continue to suffer because the Jews aren't going away.
Okay. But what about Hamas?
Hamas was elected in January 2006 in an election which Jimmy Carter, our former president, he personally monitored. He called it completely honest and fair elections. He said,
really? Do you believe? I'm asking you. You like to quote people. Norm, what do you believe? Do you believe that those were honest and just elections? That there wasn't any mass killing of people who opposed Hamas?
You have a very...
I'm asking you a question.
You have a very fertile imagination. All power to you. You could probably write a good science fiction novel. I don't know your grasp of your language, but if you have certainly the imagination. I mean, your imagination is so wild. It's so promiscuous.
Norm, please. I got to tell you something. I'm not disrespecting you to be a disillusioned maniac. I am not
the most moral army in the world.
I am asking you a question. I am asking you a question.
That's the imagination of a lunatic, of a complete crackpot.
All right. Let me. Listen, Norm. You're a definition of somewhat of insanity. Listen, Norm. I want to ask you a question, okay? Because I'm getting to know you.
No, you don't know me at all.
And I'm getting to understand. I am getting to know you a little bit. And the question I've got is actually an important question. Okay, Norm Finkelstein is now a policymaker of the world. And you have an opportunity to provide advice on what the solution is in the Middle East, what the solution is in America. Because right now, Norm, and I think we could both agree on this, what is happening today is not working. Forget about Israel created this, Hamas does this. Forget about people have a right to demonstrate that these encampments are okay. You know that none of that is working for our society. None of that is working for humanity. Do you think it's working? Let me ask you the question.
A lot of things did work. I want
to know if today, if you're happy with the current state of the world today.
Israel set out on October 8th to exterminate the people of Gaza, or to make it what it called, to make Gaza unlivable. It worked. After 2 years, it worked.
Norm.
So that was
listen, enough is enough. Stop blaming everybody else, okay?
Blaming everyone.
Bottom line is, today, November 20, today, right now, today, Norm Finkelstein, today, is it working? Is the world working?
For the handful of people who control the wealth.
I'm asking you, do you think it's working for humanity? No. Forget about, okay. Today, I will agree. You and I will agree both on this one thing. The current state of affairs in today is very dangerous.
Yeah.
Once you get this polarization of this division between people, I think you and I think that there's a opportunity here to save the world. What would that opportunity look like for you? What would you do today? What would your advice be to the Israel, Palestinian authorities, Hamas? What would your advice be to the progressives that are out there, promoting whatever they're promoting, the slogans and what have you? What do you think the reset is today?
The reset is two things. It's minimal, but I do believe that honoring, respecting international law is a minimum, but it's a necessary, but obviously not a full condition for achieving justice. It's a minimal but necessary, as the expression has it. It's a necessary but not a sufficient condition for justice, for a just world. International law, that would be first. And secondly, I feel very strongly that people guilty of crimes at an elementary level and at a state level and at a global level, those who have committed crimes should be held accountable for those crimes. I don't believe
that starts again unraveling. I'm asking you, what would you tell people? What would you tell your supporters today to support
criminal
peace?
Actions? That's complicated.
Listen, I
believe that
I think that you're barking up the wrong tree. Or I'm asking you, Norm.
Would you say if somebody said we have to prosecute the Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg, they had to be held accountable for their crimes? Would you say, well, that's causing things to unravel?
Okay, Norm. So you think there should be a prosecution of war crimes? You think there should be?
Do you believe that accountability for the Nazi crimes was necessary in order for humanity to continue?
I'm asking you for solutions here. I'm not.
You wouldn't have a problem bumping into Goering in the supermarket. Would you have a problem with that?
I think that this is a ridiculous line. I honestly think, Norm, you are circumventing an issue. I want to know. So you feel that having hoping a trial, you think that a Nuremberg style trial, you think that is one of the things that you would do?
I said there are two obligations. First, to obey international law, and secondly, there has to be accountability for criminal action. That includes
who is international law? Who?
That includes my president. I think Biden was complicit in genocide. In fact, Biden was the main enabler of genocide. Israel can't breathe one breath. It can't blink its eye without the green light from the United States. The U.S., Biden, Blinken, that whole administration.
I'm going to agree with you.
They should be hanged.
Norm, I'm going to agree. So what is?
And I have no problem saying that if they were hung from a lamppost, I would say that doesn't even begin to approach what justice should be. My late mother.
So you want to see people?
My late mother.
Let's say all that happens. What's the day after? What would you like to see in Israel today?
There's no day after. There's a struggle to achieve justice in the world, a reasonable justice in the world. That's a very long struggle. It's very long, protracted struggle. But there are certain basic, minimal conditions. One, under our current system of law, I believe international law has to be respected. And number two, as part of international law, it's part of international law, there has to be accountability for criminal actions.
Okay, Norm, I find that some of your answers to be ambiguous. I'm looking for specifics over here. It's okay. It's all right. I'm looking for solutions. So first of all, a lot of people do follow you, and I'd like to know something. I'd like you to give them a message. Do you believe that they should continue in their sort of hateful and possibly anti-Semitic reactions to the world, or would you suggest that they seek a peaceful resolution and that they love thy neighbor and that they look for an opportunity to bridge differences? What would your advice? What would you tell them right now? To continue the struggle?
There are two levels. There's a personal moral level, and there is the legal political level. On a personal moral level, I never lectured my parents about their hatred for Germans. I never said, you should love Germans, we should learn to get along, we should all be friends. My parents hated Germans to the last breath of their life. I never thought to lecture them on it. They hated Poles. They grew up in Poland. They hated Poles. I never thought to lecture them on it. So on the personal level, if the people of Gaza and the people of the West Bank, if they hate every last Israeli, they have that right. I'm not lecturing them. But on the political, legal level, I accept that the current standards of international law should be applied in order to achieve a resolution of the conflict.
Okay, not everybody out there knows what the current level of international law, and maybe they should educate themselves.
The current level is very clear. Two states in the June 1967 border. All the settlements are illegal. All the settlers are illegal. East Jerusalem is integral to an independent Palestinian state living side by side with Israel. There's no ambiguity whatsoever on the law. None, zero, none.
The
occupation is illegal at this point. Israel has no rights in the occupied Palestinian territories except to leave.
Under technical law, Israel's right to even what's called the occupied territories. They're not occupied. They're territories in dispute. They're not occupied territories because it's the same country that Israel had when it was the Kingdom of Judea. You can't occupy a country that once was your country. The word occupation is the worst mistake Israel made. Until the Oslo Accords, the word occupation was never uttered by a Jew on the whole planet. No one used it. A monstrous mistake, because occupation is a very aggressive verb and it has a very horrible connotation, and it totally is misapplied to the facts of Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. Even if you thought there was an occupation, which I don't think there is, but even if there is, under international law, it's a military occupation. And a military occupation requires no return of any of the land until what? Until the threat of force is removed. So the minute Hamas used the word again and again and again, that, in my view, created a green light for Israel to do anything it wanted to do to defend its people, to remove the threat of violence against them, and to create deterrence under the international law. That's what you do to achieve deterrence, to make sure that it won't happen again and again and again.
And Israel should be respected in return. Israel should be recognized as a sovereign state, right to defend itself, right to self-determination. Would you agree with that? I have no
problem with that. That's the law. I said the law is a necessary, but in my opinion, insufficient condition for achieving justice. The only thing is, I will not leave out, because it would be a desecration of my family's memory, if I were to leave out the issue of accountability. You are child killers. You are murderers. You carry.
Who's you? Who's you?
Meaning the state of Israel and the society.
Okay.
And the society, and they have to be held accountable for their crimes.
That's pretty strong accusation.
Well, actually, I don't think it's strong at all. Actually, Israelis say it themselves.
What about Hamas? What about are they child killers?
I feel about Hamas as I feel about the slave rebellions.
Unless I'm mistaken, I do not remember in the Deep South that the slaves of plantation owners who were in chains and whipped had the ability to create 350 miles of tunnels in order to get out of the Deep South. Where's the rocketry? I mean, we're trying to say as if there's no agency of Gazans. They have no agencies. They're slaves. And I'm saying, really? How did they establish arsenals of weapons and sophisticated weapons? How did they do that? Slaves in the Deep South didn't have any agencies. They were literally on plantations owned by white people. There are no Jews that live in Gaza.
Are they child killers? Have they murdered children, brutally raped? Do they use rape?
There's no evidence.
Would you? I just want to know something. You've said what Israel is.
As a factual matter, there's no evidence for the rape.
Oh, come on.
Okay, let's end on it because we're already at 12:58. I have to go, but let's go through the evidence. You say, oh, come on. I've studied it.
No, come on. There is evidence. There's evidence. Look at Norm, you twist things. You're a good twister. You're good at the game of twister.
Let's see the evidence. Okay? This is where I'm going to leave off.
Listen.
Okay? I've examined it very closely. Everybody agrees there's no medical or forensic evidence of rape. None. Zero.
The United Nations Women's Committee on Women's Rights was very late to the party. They refused, even the Me Too movement. Everyone failed the Jewish girls of southern Israel. American feminists, the Me Too movement, and the United Nations Committee on Women's Rights. Everyone remained silent. But eventually, even the Women's Committee of Human Rights in the United Nations, which again hates Israel, but they eventually sent their own people to speak with the forensic examiners. He's saying, I have seen no evidence. He saw pelvises? Was Norman Finkelstein actually there? Did he actually see the evidence? Has he been to the exhibit on the Nova Festival and seen the blood on the crotch of the panties and pants and gym shorts of girls? Did he see that blood on the panties in the crotch? Did he see the pelvises with machine gun fire blown into them? What is he talking about? Again, even the committee that was late of women who are supposed to be committed to human rights eventually showed up and spoke to pathologists and forensic examiners, looked at the evidence and concluded there was sexual violence and rape. There was videotape of people who were captured who said, I raped and my father raped, and then I raped again. So did he hear that? Does he think that they were coerced? He probably does. That the Gazans themselves admitted to the rapes themselves. And there was several where you literally heard, I did it, and then my father went again after me, as if they took turns. And so Finkelstein is telling your audience that he has evidence that it never happened. And yet people who did the rape are telling you, I did the raping. And Finkelstein is saying, no, you didn't rape. You didn't rape because you raped a Jewess. And if you raped a Jewish girl, it doesn't count.
I want to read something to you. I want to read something.
No,
I read an article from Roz Rothstein, and this is what she wrote. I find Finkelstein beyond despicable. I believe he openly and methodically lies in order to promote his own anti-Israel agenda. This is not my words. This comes from something I read. I watched as 300 to 400 students were poisoned by his Finkelstein syndrome. You have a syndrome named after you. I walked away feeling saddened by the notion that young hearts and minds were affected by a man of such dubious scholarship and malicious intent. Norm, you've been given an opportunity to provide constructive, to provide a constructive.
I'll give you constructive criticism, constructive advice, because here's my constructive advice, which you promised that you will include. My constructive advice is Israel society needs to be de-Nazified. Have a good de-Nazified. Have a good day.
Okay.
It's very similar to what he said before. I'm going to hold up a mirror to the worst things that have happened to Jews and then say I'm projecting it upon the Jews that have now learned those lessons and are doing it worse than they received it. If I say that the Jews are subject to the Holocaust is genocide, I now say Israel causes genocide. And now I say the Israelis themselves are not Western liberals, but they're Nazis. That the entire nation is a fascistic country that has no democratic values and that is only interested in killing the other, the Palestinian, like the Nazis. So to be denazified means that you need to stop being like the very people, again, projecting the worst days that have happened to Jews, and to either project it as if Jews are causing it, or the other theme of the Israel Ellis interview was trivializing it.
Today's woke progressives, who are part of this bizarre red-green alliance of Marxists and far leftists and Islamists, have their own vocabulary of delegitimization. They say that, Israelis are settler colonialists and white oppressors. Now, of course, the Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. That's Jews, Judea, so they're not settlers and they're not colonists in their own country. That's what this is about. It's not about what the Jews do or don't do, whether the IDF is a moral army or if it isn't, whether, the tactics in Gaza were right or wrong. It's about the Jews and Israel having no right to exist.
Problem is, a lot of what I said does not require a genius to say it. It really, most people, you don't need me to say, you said the editorial board of the New York Times said this, show us that date. You just said there's a poll that says 47%. You took a look, it's not there, right? If you had the poll, you would say the Pew survey or the Council on Foreign Relations, they on such and such a date issued a report. That's what you'd say. So he never says that. He doesn't have any evidence of anything that he says. He says things like international law, but he doesn't tell us the law. He says there's evidence, but he doesn't tell us the evidence. So you don't need to be me. Anybody can look at that and go, yeah, but what's he talking about? He's just saying shit. It means nothing what he's saying.